Welcome to episode 321 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Brando Benetton, who is a recent USC graduate and made an action short film that looks incredible. It's really an amazing short film, and they ended up using it as a pitch for a story idea as a reoccurring TV series, which I thought was a real good use of a 45-minute short film. We talked through all the trials and tribulations of getting this film produced and how this led him along his career path. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 321. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. Obviously, the big thing is still my feature film, The Rideshare Killer. I'm recording this podcast interview a little over 2 weeks after the Kickstarter has ended, and the money did eventually flow into our account this week. Kickstarter tells you up front it's going to take about 2 weeks, and I think it literally took 2 weeks. I think we ended on a Monday. Well, I guess it was a little over 2 weeks because we ended on Monday, and I don't think it actually flew into our account until Tuesday or Wednesday, 2 weeks later. So it was actually like 15, 16 days. Tony, the other producer, and I, we are actively looking to bring on an editor now. We've already met with some folks and been emailing with a lot of people, have some more meetings set up. So we're going to make our final decision on the editor probably in the next day or two. Once we hire the editor, we'll hopefully start working on a rough cut. I'm hoping this process, getting the rough cut, only takes 4 to 6 weeks. There's quite a bit of technical sort of setup the editor has to do, and I think I showed the footage to one of the first editors we met, and he mentioned that it would take him, I think it would take him a few weeks just to get all the sound synced and kind of just get everything set up, and then probably another few weeks for him to get a rough cut done. So that's kind of the timeline, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. The nice thing about this, again, 4 to 6 weeks just to get the rough cut. Then there's still a lot of work once the rough cut is done, but at least we'll have a cut of the film. The nice thing about this project compared with my other film that I wrote, directed, and produced, The Pinch, on that one, it was just really, really, really low budget. But with this one, we do actually have a decent amount for post-production. So we'll be able to pay people a little bit better, which will hopefully bring on experienced folks who do this full time so we can move a lot quicker and, again, hopefully have a slightly more professional product. With The Pinch, I was using folks, they were experienced and they were good, but a lot of them had full-time jobs, did other things while they were doing the various duties on the Pinch in post-production. They were doing it, nights and weekends type of thing. Obviously, you can save a lot of money finding those folks. And again, these were all good people. I don't have any complaints about any of them, but it definitely slowed down the process. Obviously, if they're working a full-time job and they can only work nights and weekends, that just limits how quickly some of this stuff can get done. And if you remember back, I was in no hurry with The Pinch, so it really wasn't a big deal. I really needed to save the money because the budget was so low. But with this one, again, we have a little bit more money, so hopefully it'll be a little bit quicker and we'll get through this whole process hopefully a little faster. Anyways, that's the main thing I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today, I am interviewing writer, director, and producer Brando Benetton. Here is the interview. Welcome, Brando, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
So I was born in Paris but raised in Italy. I moved to the States when I was 16, and I would definitely say that the way I got into movies was the fact that we didn't have a TV with channels when I was a kid, and the only source of entertainment that was allowed to me was VHSs. And I would be doing these trips to London once in a while. They would come back with Disney movies solely in English, and so I would be watching the movie. I would not understand anything that was going on because I didn't speak the language, and then eventually would make my way over to a friend's house and watch Pinocchio in Italian, and my mind would be blown because I would finally understand the plot of the movie. So I started to understand and learn English that way, and at the same time, that's why I think cinema in general was a big part of my life, because it literally was, of course I would go outside and have friends, but that was a starter. And then my stepfather gifted me, what used to be his old camera. I shouldn't say gift, lend it. He would generously lend it, and so in an effort to emulate the kind of entertainment we were seeing, we thought we would start our own thing. So that's where we got started, but it didn't really get serious until at age 16. I made the move to New York, and haven't really been back since.
Okay, perfect. And so what were some of those first steps? What did you do when you moved from Italy to New York at 16? Were you done with high school, going to college? Were your parents moving and you kind of tagged along? What did that move actually look like?
Yeah, great question. So my parents did not tag along. It was just me. And now that you say, what I remember doing a lot of, it was my last year of high school. So I made... What you a lot have is very frequently in Europe, you can have your junior year be abroad and then come back. And I obviously never came back. But what was really useful about it, and what I was in going to film sets a lot. There's this website that's still running. It's called On Location Vacations, and I would do my homework in the afternoon. Now, keep in mind, I was 17, no adults around. I was trying to be responsible, but I would do the homework in the afternoon. And then I would spend evenings and even nights sometimes until 2, 3, 4 in the morning with school the next day. And I would just stand and watch them film. So, Tower Heist with Ben Stiller, Mr. Popper's Penguins with Jim Carrey, movies where I was slowly starting to get an understanding of who the assistant director was. And this scene took 5 hours to shoot, but 6 months from now, when I see it in the theater, it only, takes up 30 seconds. So managing time and resources, it really gave me a sense of how elaborate real film sets are. And while I was there, I applied to college. And once I made the move up to college in upstate New York, I went to Ithaca College and was extremely lucky. If you want, we can talk about, I started working and then I went back to grad school, which I finished, and I went to USC. And these two experiences were really apart from each other in regards to, again, just the process. But for Ithaca in upstate New York, we were in the middle of nowhere, which seemed like a curse, but it was really a blessing because you were really up against no pressure at all. There was no industry breathing down your neck. It was just an open environment where we ended up, by the way, which we'll talk about, Nightfire, and the as a thesis film there. They would just let you run free with any kind of genre ideas you had. So that was a really positive direction I took without knowing, because all I saw was woods and snow. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. I don't want to go in the middle of upstate New York. But it turned out to be great because it allowed for us to really hone in on the kind of films we were interested in, and there was an embracing of that. You had students who wanted to do gay musicals and westerns and action movies and horror films, and there was no restriction whatsoever, which I think is the best experience a student filmmaker can have. Is if you're going to fail big, and make sure you fail while you're in school. So we took chances,
Yeah. So then talk about that. So then you're at Ithaca, then you go to USC. How did those two programs differ? What did you get out of USC? It sounds like we kind of understand what you got out of Ithaca. What did you get out of the USC education?
Yeah, so I finished Ithaca, and the film, we can talk about that once we get to Nightfire, but the film started snowballing Nightfire, but it didn't go anywhere. So I went back to Italy, and I had the craziest job I'll ever have in my life. Because of the movie, an amusement park hired me to direct a major stunt show because we had a lot of stunts. So I did that for a year, and my parents were really encouraging me in going back to studying. And I didn't want to go back to school, so I said, I want to make sure I don't get in. Wherever I apply, I'm going to make sure I show them I'm applying, but I'm not going to get in because I'd been rejected. I've been rejected by NYU twice. I had been rejected by USC. I applied to USC, Go figure, I get in. And at that point, I think one would be, if you're lucky enough to have the resources to go, why not? So I went to USC, and this is a 3-year master's program. And I think it really varied in regards to the perception one may have going to a grad program. I was still relatively young at the time. You had classmates who were in their 40s and 50s and people coming from law school, and you expect to be treated with a level of, I don't want to use the respect because there's always respect, but knowledge, in regards to what you want to be doing. When we started encountering, strangely enough, were a lot of little boxes and limits where I think the school, is obviously deserving of its number one film school reputation, but they also were trying to keep the students from not taking risks that could in any way, tamper. So I think what you started to get was a school that was cranking out movies that were a lot more specific and similar in tone, and you get amazing dramas, social dramas and racial dramas. If you look at the Student Academy Awards, there's some fantastic work in the live action coming out of there. But the connections was honestly what came out of it the most. And I got to be honest, my experience wasn't everybody's experience. I was just feeling a little bit frustrated, and what I asked myself while I was there was, what can I do that I could not be doing anywhere else in the world? So the idea of sitting down with, professionals and ask, Academy Award winning composers or production designers or cinematographers, and learning from them the same way you are on the podcast, extracting and sharing knowledge. And, even though it kind of pains me to say, that was really the luck of being in USC, is that there's a great community of filmmakers who has come out of there, and everyone seems a little more willing to help each other out. Oh, I'll talk to you. You're from USC, of course, So that really helped. And again, it wasn't bad. It was different. It was kind of a whiplash going from, an undergrad experience where you saw all these genres and nothing was laughed at in any way, to going into, so it must have been 8 years later, going into a thesis screening where all the movies kind of felt like the same. And there were some great ones that shined, but there wasn't, we could talk about a lot of, film programs in general, but the idea of not being welcomed if you had something different to offer was kind of limiting. But again, I think the lesson to be learned was like finding a way around that.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's not a function of them trying to prepare people for the industry a little more, and there is a rigidity to the industry where, being too out there is maybe not necessarily, it's the old Break Snyder, the same but different, and that's kind of what it sounds like you were running into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely what you touched on, it's exactly that. I think it's the idea, they don't hide it, is they're getting you ready for the Hollywood industry, which to me, and I was very vocal about, and I think it's great regardless to have conversations about, our experience, because I said that doesn't need to be everyone's reality. If you have students like myself that come from Europe, or Indian students that, where the Bollywood system is completely different, is it, worth investing? And the example I kept giving, because we kept asking, why is that? How is that helping us? I'm sure it is helping us in some way to have some limits, but why? And I think even though we were grad students and many of us had made movies and had found enthusiasm and happiness and success in these genre films, they would rather, for people's safety, they would rather say no to 100 students pitching some crazy idea. And this is mostly about safety too, because you want to remember this is something that I don't think is talked about enough. For the sake of, skipping permits and being out there, you can have accidents and these things that happened. And the same way, I know NYU had some unfortunate events happen, and that's what the headline would say, NYU student. So I think in that case, they would rather say no to 100 people, even though 10 of those 100 probably know exactly what they're talking about, and they have done it, and they would be responsible. I think it's a blanket of safety where, and sometimes applying limitations, you try and spark a new creative direction. Because you cannot do that, we're going to find a more creative version to deliver whatever it is you're trying to deliver. So I wonder, that probably could be it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a very valid point. In any event, so let's dig into your short action film, Nightfire. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or logline. What is the sort of the premise of this story?
Sure. So it's pretty much a spy thriller, as you said. I was very lucky. I grew up with films that really, really embraced locations as an action device. John Frankenheimer's Ronin, and obviously the Bond films, and realizing that it's a vehicle to transport people to places they've never been, and in regards to action, show them things they've never seen. So it follows, these two American agents who infiltrate a base to retrieve, some top secret content that's, baked into these little microchips. And their plan obviously goes awry the moment this prisoner enters the picture, and they're forced to nearly compromise the mission by dragging him along. And in doing so, they pretty much ignite a snowball of catastrophic events that, just get things in motion, and they escalate over and over. So it's we are lucky enough to have, Dylan Baker play the prisoner, and he was very, very supportive in that. And so Nightfire specifically, as I was saying, it's a spy thriller that follows these two American agents who are hired to retrieve military chips that contain top secret content. And their plan almost goes awry, the moment unexpected political prisoner enters the picture. And we're lucky to have a great international cast. We shot the entire movie in Italy, even though it takes place in and around Europe. We shot it all in northern Italy. Keep in mind, as I was saying, this was born as a TV pilot, a student production, and this was all in the effort. We were sitting in that auditorium the first time we arrived at Ithaca, and we're like, what would we want to see on that big screen that would blow our mind as students? What is the one thing that would really get us jazzed, which I think is all that we are doing. You, me, the listeners, we want to make movies that are so emotionally specific to our experience, and that we cannot know what people are going to like or not like. But if that movie was playing on the big screen, you would lose your stuff. You would be so happy. So that was it. And we went about constructing it by, this is in the, even before writing, we started listing all the things we knew we had at our disposal, because we couldn't, dream up a Hollywood production. So in regards to, and then bank on raising the money, that's something that's very difficult. So
so let's start right there. So let's start before you've written the script. What is a list of some of these things that you had access to that you thought, okay, we can incorporate these high production value things into our story? Maybe just give us a list of some real examples of things that you had and you used.
Absolutely. So for example, we're trying to design, which this is something fascinating that Christopher McQuarrie, the director of Mission Impossible Fallout, has talked about in regards to the same way with Rogue Nation. They were drawing up different set pieces and understanding, which is an unusual way of constructing story. How do we go from this to that in an organic way? So we knew, for example, the amusement park that I was mentioning before, they have a stunt show and they have an amazing set. This open air Afghanistan looking set, which has trucks and uniforms with soldiers. And I was like, we got to have a military base in there. And they also have a submarine set, which is literally a recreation of an entire, U-571 kind of submarine. I was like, we got to have a sequence there. We went to Verona. We shot in my hometown of Verona, which is a beautiful city in northern Italy, famous for Romeo and Juliet, but it has this massive open arena, and in front of the mayor's office, we knew that they were going to be building for the end of the New Year's. We shot it right over winter break, and they were going to have a big stage. We couldn't afford building a stage, so we talked to City Hall and we said, you're dismounting the stage on January 2nd? Wait until January 3rd. We're going to shoot there on the night of January 2nd, because it doesn't cost you anything. So And even in regards to car chases, we would go out and we said, okay, we got to find a way to buy literally 250, euro cars that we know they're going to break down. But that's the only way we can afford to have cars smashing into each other and all these things. So we just started listing all these things. And same could go with actors. We know that person who knows that person. We definitely could try and have them in the movie if they think it's. So listing from vehicles to locations to actors, just listing all these things and then trying to find an organic way of what is the most emotional order in which we can present this information so that it feels like an organic story. And that was a process of many, many months. We were rewriting the script, even the mornings of, and we just had 12 days, as I was saying. It was a student production. I went to all the classmates and I said, friends, not only we cannot pay you, we cannot even fly you over to Italy. But if you can get yourselves there, not only, obviously we're going to feed you and we're going to house you. We had 30 students, sleeping in sleeping bags in this giant living room. But we can assure you it's going to be unlike any experience you've ever done. And to me, that's what, often you guys talk about on the podcast. I'm very lucky to have gone to film school, but the experience of those 12 days of shooting where you have dozens and dozens of professionals, because we can talk about that. The two departments where we did not want to mess around safety-wise was stunts and special effects. We had to have professionals for that because you cannot improvise yourself, an explosive expert. But
let's hope not.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But the experience of making a movie like that was worth way more than so many years in film school. Because
now, what about like the cinematographer? I mean, you had a lot of pretty intricate action stuff. Was that a student cinematographer, or did you have someone that had experience with that action stuff?
Great question. Garrett Nicholson, who's the cinematographer of Nightfire. I went to a screening. These things happen, and I went to a student screening in one of the films. I went up to him after, and I said, I don't know you. He was my same year. It was a large cohort, never met the kid. I was like, you and I got to work together. And we did. And I think, so much of the success of the movie is based on the cinematography. And we realized early on that we had to shoot the entire movie on a Steadicam. Because in 12 days, with so much, as you know, action, we would sometimes shoot 7 pages of dialogue in 2 hours. And sometimes we would shoot a 3-minute car chase over 6 nights. And it's that management of time which we're talking about, where you realize you gotta, it's a push and pull. Some things, if it's not important to the story, we can afford walking away from it. And there are other moments where we would literally stay up for 24 hours in a row because we understood that if we don't have this moment, the movie falls apart. So cinematography, again, we shot on a Red Dragon, which at the time was the hottest camera we could think of, just based on, and this is also an interesting thing, we shot the entire movie mostly at night. We set it at night because I was really scared of having lighting continuity be, if one day you got clouds and the other you got sun, I was like, we cannot afford to deal with that. So we shot it all at night because we knew there was going to be no mistake of, matching that. And the Dragon as a camera was a camera that would hold the shadows very well. So that was the decision in that. Obviously today it's, can rent it for anything. But yeah, so I don't know if that
What did that conversation look like when you went to the Verona City Council and said, can we shoot, we don't have any money, we don't have anything, we're a bunch of student filmmakers, can we shoot in your, great little courtyard here?
Great question. So I sat down the summer before we started shooting with all of the city councils, so the fire marshal and the the person who was in charge of transportation and health and sanitation and safety for the trees and parks and and we would go when I acted out the entire movie for them, and once in a while someone would say, well, hold on, you can't do that. We can't give you 2 lanes. We're going to have to give you 1 lane. You're like, okay, so you're managing and pushing and pulling. The one thing they wouldn't allow us to do was blow up a vehicle, like literally blow up a vehicle in the air. Very cool effect. You can find it in the trailer, but we had to go to a different city. That was the one thing they wouldn't let us do. So we went to a nearby city, shot on private property. And even then we had to, because again, as I was saying, safety is the most important thing. So even though we sound like it's all crazy and bombastic, we didn't want to get anyone in a position of being hurt in any way. So you still have fire marshals on set when you're, having explosions of cars. Yeah, you really had to sell them on it. And I think that the city, there's a luck, I think, for any one of us going back to shooting. If you shoot in LA, they don't care. They've seen it. They'll say no. They'll try and get money out of you. But the wonderful thing about going to a town which hadn't seen as much filming is that you can get them excited. You can get them so excited about it, and you can show that they don't know. So Dylan Baker, who's a terrific actor, it meant the world that he was coming in. It made the movie feel like it was a Hollywood production, even though it was really, a bunch of kids, and talking about the experiences you learn. We had the newspapers covering us on front page or in the newspaper every day, and they would be handing out addresses and times where we were shooting. Now the first couple of days, it sounds cool. You're getting all this attention, never had that before. And after third, fourth day, you're realizing that by publishing the times and dates, there are all these crowds. And now the moment you're going on a reverse of someone else, you got to get everyone out of the way, and it's eating up time. These things you cannot learn in film school. These are the way I always put it with myself. I think life in general is one big. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, sure. We can.
Sure, let's do it.
We're all adults here.
It's just like one infinite list of fuck ups you got to go through. And the more you go through them earlier in your experience, the more experienced you are once you arrive to things later, which is, to me, was the pleasure once I got to USC. And maybe I felt a little frustrated about directing, because no matter what I pitched, the answer was no. And I promise you, I wasn't pitching explosions at USC. But I started working a lot as an assistant director, a first assistant director, on other people's sets, on larger sets, because I was still getting the experience out of other people's mistakes, the same way, anyone working on a set would. Or vice versa, I could be offering solutions whenever, I've gone through that mistake already. Let me tell you why it's not going to work. This is what you're going to run into. Oh, yeah, we hadn't considered that. So don't worry, it wasn't all, flowers and happiness. We had our mistakes on set. The 250 euro car broke down before the car chase was over. We're like, great. Okay, how do we finish the car chase? We don't have a car. So you're trying to figure out, you're trying to play with sound. You've got to rewrite the scene. So all these things, thank God it happened in the way that it happened, because it really pushed us. We came back to school after those 12 days just feeling like different people. And we had 3.5 months to just edit it all together and sound mix it. We were just better people for it once we got back. And it's still, even after the movie was presented in the thesis screening, we did not stop working on it for a year or two, just because I've learned that once you have footage like this, you should always be challenging the material. And sound is such a vital part of the filmmaking experience that, I was talking to Elizabeth Ronald Dodger, who was a wonderful editor, and she did John Wick and Atomic Blonde. And she was telling me how much of Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron is ADR. They rewrote a quarter of the screenplay in the ADR session, and it doesn't matter. Challenging what you have is always the most important thing. If you can make it better, I think it's your duty to do that. So, yeah.
So let's talk about just the writing of the script a little bit. You have a shared writing credit with Lo Silva. Maybe talk about that process. What did that actually look like as you guys are writing? Are you sitting in the same room, churning out script pages? Are you dividing up scenes? What does your relationship look like, and how did the script actually get written?
Great question. So Lost was in New York throughout that entire. I contacted him, I believe, in April or May, and we didn't get shooting until December. So I was in LA and he was in New York City, and we were going back and forth at the time. And I think he was such a terrific writer, and I welcomed him on because I realized that I was lacking in writing dialogue, which is one of the things obviously are the most challenging. And in an effort to divide and conquer, I knew what could have been my strengths, but I also knew that I should have been smart enough to bring on board someone who was way better than me in regards to covering other ground. So I presented to him what was roughly the structure of the story that still is to this day, and then we went in and by obviously there was I think a month before of just talking out ideas and doing long B sheets of ironing out any wrinkles. Why is that character making that decision? Oh, you know what? Actually, I hadn't thought about it. I just assumed it made sense in the script. So you iron out these wrinkles for the first month over, exchanging emails and Word documents. And then eventually once he's ready, he dives in and he took what was already, a complete draft of the script and pretty much made it his own. It was 55 pages, and this is, again, talking about understanding where a film can live and what the purpose is. It was 55 pages, and they kept telling us, you guys are idiots. It's not really short. It's not a feature. Just go either way. And we just felt this was the length of, that the story needed. We shot it. It was an hour and 10 minutes, and then we cut it down to 45 minutes once we, trimmed out any kind of fat. And that's when we realized the movie was really a TV pilot the entire time, even though we hadn't, predicted for it to be. And the moment we twisted it and started presenting it that way, not only made more sense to us, but it made sense to everyone else. Because the moment you go pitching a 42-minute short film, people look at you crazy. Yeah. But he kept going, and the moment we were off to the races at the last week of December, that's when we split parts, and then there was some rewriting done on the day on set, and even some of it was from the actors, who coming in and saying, I think this would be a lot better, and you try and find the perfect marriage between the two versions.
So you're when you're writing this, you're still at Ithaca College, is that correct?
That's correct.
And were you getting feedback from your professors? Like, were they like, man, this seems a little ambitious for a student film? What were you getting from them?
Great question. Yeah, there were definitely two professors who I was turning to. And we had seen ambitious productions before at the school, and that's what inspired us to do it. But it was people would go to a different town in upstate New York and do a post-apocalyptic thing. But to this scale, that's what I loved about it looking back. Nobody was trying to talk us out of it. We knew that students were laughing behind our back. And obviously, nobody would have banked on us. But they believed. They said, you guys are adults. If you kill someone, it's on you. As long as you know that. And we said, we do know it. But on a producerial level, I think all of these things, even if when you're writing, being a producer of the same project makes you more aware that if you write this in, that's a challenge you're going to have to solve. That is a problem for Brando from the future. The same way, if you write your way out of something, that's something you are not, dropping on yourself from the future. You're having to solve that out. But these two teachers regularly, they were very busy, so I would come in and I would deliver the draft of the script, print it, and they would go through it, and they would say, this works, this doesn't. And there was definitely an immaturity on a storytelling level. I think the film succeeds so much more on a technical level, which is why I was telling you, that by the time we were over, we just looked at each other and said, I wish we could rewrite it. There's so many beats, lines we just cut out because we didn't have time on the day. And by going back and taking the sound design as an opportunity to rewrite the movie, we started replacing all these things that we had missed. And they would give amazing notes. And we crammed. So we started writing in March, something that you don't really hear about. People taking a full year before they go into shooting just to do pre-production. And once Christmas came around, we just took off, and we looked at the teachers and we looked, and said, we'll be back and we'll either be victorious or it'll be a total failure. Only one way to find out. And when we came back, we had the movie, and now it was all about, okay, we got to assemble it in 3.5 months.
Mm-hmm. So then how did you raise the money? What did that process look like? You had your script, you had your plan, and what was the process of actually raising the money to actually get this thing done?
Great question. So it's a mix. I think many filmmakers are lucky enough to have grants coming from the school, and whether there are funding grants or completion grants. We finished a movie, but we need a little more for something else. We definitely had support from the school in that regard. There was also crowdfunding, and that was a lesson we learned. Obviously, the crowdfunding didn't go as well as we wished for it to go. So we got some of it from that. Some of it was frankly just borrowing money, IOUs, promises. And the luck that we had is that we're trying to have, or people donating, that's what on the side too. It's just getting different funding from different directions. Obviously, it's never the amount of money you wish for it to be. You go, you shoot, you hope that you don't waste money, because that's something that I felt in some way. You run a risk of not only feels like it's not enough, but you end up spending money on things you never needed, but you couldn't have known at the time. And then we came back, and the luck that we had later on is that we came out with the movie on the other end, and it was pretty much a debit. We owe money to people. And because everyone's telling you, this is not a short, this is not a feature, you guys are idiots, there was no hope for us to sell it anywhere. And what we did is that we put a trailer on YouTube just to try and spice up the excitement. And someone ended up, a distribution house in New York called Hughes, ended up seeing it and asked to buy it. And which, again, it was very strange lengthwise, but the fascinating thing for me, it was trying to understand what about the project was appealing. So in this case, we have action in Europe, and people want to go to Europe if they've never been, or even if they have been. So that was something.
And what are they going to do with it? What are they going to do with the film? Are they going to air it somewhere?
Yeah. So, for example, this happened a while back, and they bought it, and they put it up somewhere, and now there's an upcoming release of it. It got bought and incorporated into another theatrical release. So technically speaking, now the movie's going theatrical, merged with another short, and that's one thing. And on the other, finally, it took forever, but there's a very wide video-on-demand release coming up, which we can talk about. It's going to be in April. But that's useful, and I'm glad we had all this time, because even though technically the movie was completed a while back, we never stopped challenging it. We knew that the extra work would be temporary, the fatigue, and but the film would live forever. So as Jackie Chan always would say, is like, are you going to go in every single auditorium and tell them, oh, sorry, we couldn't afford on the day? It's like, no, the audience is going to receive the movie, and it's either going to work or not. So we've been working down to the wire, up until now to get it finished, and I'm very glad people are finally able to see it in its complete form.
So now what's next for you? Do you feel like this has actually led you to your next project? Has it opened up some doors for you?
Yes, I think what it definitely, which people hear a lot, having a film of any kind, student or not, that is a good business card and a visual technical level. I mentioned Garrett Nicholson, who was nominated by the American Society of Cinematographers, which for him was like, Mount Olympus, the highest achievement he could have received, and he got a nomination from them. And it's a testament to how good the movie looked. I think all in all, we talk about screenplay techniques and putting together resources, but it's really about making movies that feel expensive. Obviously, the storytelling it's at the forefront, but these are the kind of corners we're trying to cut and deliver as much big production value in front of the camera as opposed to behind. Expensive catering, expensive fee of the actors. Audiences are not going to see that, but if you can deliver something in front, if you can steal a couple shots in Grand Central Station or shoot, with whatever it is, that's what I think the movie did for us, is that it showed people. We would get in rooms, and for the first time, where usually they would be worried and say, well, we don't know if you guys can handle, high production value, moving pieces, explosions, all these things. The moment you can show them, we have done this, and at this price tag, which honestly, again, we're talking about student film level budget, people took us more seriously, because for once, even trust me, I look like a puppy, and the moment they see the movie speaks for itself, and they trust you a little more. I think it's very challenging for first-time directors, a chicken and the egg situation, where you get in a room and you have a script, and they would say, well, you have never shot a feature. How do we know you're going to handle the pressure, of a 32-day shoot? For once, having something that is not a feature, but is of that scale, allowed us to get in the room in the first place and for them to listen. And there's only so much you can do. Chris McQuarrie always talks about the fact that you cannot control the direction of a career. All you can do is control the quality of the work you put out there. So I think that's what we were focused on and what we're going to be focusing on now. But yeah, we're trying to, have the plan B and the plan C. And, we talked about USC and Ryan Coogler's story before Black Panther. He did Fruitvale Station. And this legendary story around USC goes that, Forrest Whitaker brought him in, and there's a mentorship program, and he's going to be pitching a movie, and he pitches idea number 1, and they say no, and number 2, and number 3, and number 4. And at the end of the 4th one, they say, oh, we're sorry, but none of these work for us. Do you have anything else? And as he's exiting the door, he says, well, hold on a second. I read this new newspaper article. He didn't even have an outline, a fleshed out idea. He just mentioned the article, that became Fruitvale Station, and that was bought. So I think for us in general, the mistake we made at the beginning was like, well, now they're taking us seriously. We got to make sure we have the idea number 2 and 3 and 4, and one may be a TV show and one may be a feature. You got to love each idea just as much. Don't have 100 ideas. Have 2 or 3, but give them genre variety. Don't do all action movies. Otherwise, that's all they're going to expect from you. Don't do all comedies. Show them that a good storyteller tells a good story regardless of the medium and regardless of the genre, because they're going to be looking for different things in different moments. So that's for us has been, kind of preparing 2-3 things we feel very strongly about. And so far it looks like it's going to be a busy spring and talking to people. So we're grateful for any support we can get in any way.
Well, perfect. Maybe you can tell us when Nightfire is coming out. You mentioned you're going to release, I think, in March or April, you said, but maybe you can give us that, and then people can check it out.
Absolutely. So I think we are very excited. We are putting together, new material. There are trailers out there that people can find online. I think we're aiming for the weekend of April 10th. If people want to write it down in their calendar, Bond is also coming out that weekend. We felt that rather than dropping it on a random date, welcoming a similar audience would be a good idea. So I think if anyone wants to, I think I'm going to put the info on my website. If people want to go, it's definitely going to be on video on demand, whether that's Amazon Prime or other streaming platforms. People are going to be able to find it, so they can check the website. But I think April 10th is the weekend we're looking at.
Okay, perfect. And as long as you're mentioning the website, what is the website URL and anything you're comfortable sharing, Twitter account, Facebook, you can mention all that stuff now and we'll round that up for the show notes.
Sure. So my website is brandobenetton.com, and I'll send it to you so you can have it in the in the links notes. And on Facebook, we have a Facebook page for the movie, which is Nightfire Movie. It should be the only one people find. Other than that, I think if people check out the YouTube channel, we're going to be releasing new content, but the film is the film, and we're lucky to have such a strong marketing campaign behind it, because I think we have realized that rather than releasing new trailers, showing people the behind the scenes process of it, the same way films like 1917 and Top Gun have been shining a spotlight on the filmmaking and technical experience that was making the movie. I think we're going to be doing the same, because I've been very grateful in seeing how surprised people are that, the fact that hopefully this can be an example that a bunch of students came together. Trust me, they were laughed at by some of their classmates. They went out not knowing what was going to come of it, and hopefully we came out on top. But I'm very happy to be finally sharing the movie with people.
Yeah, well, perfect, Brando. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me. Good luck with this film, and of course, good luck with your next films as well. And hopefully we'll have you on in the future and we can talk about some of your new films.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
So, thank you, Brandon. Good luck to you. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Philip Harder, who just did a cool 1970s period piece called Tuscaloosa, starring Natalie Dyer from Stranger Things. It's based on a book by Glasgow Phillips, which then Philip went and adapted into this screenplay, ultimately directed and got this movie done. Philip goes into great detail about how all this came together. As with a lot of the people that come on the podcast, it wasn't a simple process. It wasn't a process that just went very quickly. It took a number of years by the time he got the book and wrote the script and got everything set up. So again, another real good example of just how persistence, just a lot of persistence won the day. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's our show. Thank you for listening.